Okay, we're recording. Michael Broom, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with me.
Well, it's certainly my pleasure.
I would like to jump in by start by asking you a series of questions. The first one being, if you would just share with us what is the Center for Human Systems, and to offer that kind of framework for us in a way that anyone who is not familiar with organizational development work or your past work would just get a little bit of context for really the rest of the conversation.
The Center for Human Systems is an organization set up to provide different ways of learning about how to manage change in human systems. And we all live in human systems. Families, teams, organizations, those are all human systems.
And please.
And we provide that learning by articles that are on the website, by various trainings, and by consulting and coaching to individuals and organizations.
And can you say a little bit about the history of your work in relation to organizational development work, or how does it connect to other kinds of similar efforts?
Well, the field of organization development is very different than other forms of managing change, because it focuses on understanding human systems, which really allows us to get at root cause issues, and so that problems do not come back a second time or third time.
So it's like a way of dealing with business management or other forms of management that isn't focused on necessarily the kind of the output per se, but how would you give us a little bit more about?
Well, it definitely impacts the output of the organization, because if you, once we help our clients to think about it, that everything, the success of everything an organization does really depends upon the effectiveness of the groups of people who are doing it. So, yeah. So it is very connected to this productivity and success of the organization and its bottom line.
And then to go the other direction, from kind of, organizations' productivity, looking really just at you and your relationship to the work, can you tell us what is your personal connection to this work and your drive behind the Center for Human Systems?
I guess that goes back a long ways. That psychology has always kind of been my love, but then it took me a good while to discover where in the realm of psychology that would fit for me. And it turns out that the field of applied behavioral science is where I fit in terms of being able to truly make a difference, differences that are sustainable, as a psychotherapist, and I tried that for a while, it was always one person at a time, but you're really not going to change very much one person at a time. Margaret Mead said it very well. I'm not going to get the quote perfect, but the only thing that has really made a significance in the world are small groups. And small groups are the fundamental unit of human systems. And that made sense to me. And yes, this is my home, making a change in human systems.
And why? Can you articulate for you on a personal level, what is your personal connection to that work that you just articulated?
Well, one way to look at it would be that as a black man growing up in what is essentially a white country, and growing up in that world through the 40s, 50s, 60s, that the opportunities for black folks was pretty limited. And at some point I began to work in white companies, and who would look at me and say, oh, like, what can I do to really contribute? And, right? And I'd give them a stock answer around, well, when you hear your friends speaking racist stuff, speak up, but even that wasn't going to really make a lot of difference. Then I found this field of applied behavioral science, which focuses on human systems. Now that begins to really make a difference in terms of how do we change organizations so that people of color are more accepted, people of color are more accepted, women are more accepted. Initially, all of that kind of work, diversity work it was called, was done through training programs. But training programs do not change organizational cultures. Organizational cultures need to be changed through systemic work. And that's what the field of organization development and my work provides. So now we're at making meaningful, sustainable change. Yeah, you can do all the training you want, and you might get some changes at the individual level for a week, a month, but eventually it's going to slide right back to same old, until the basic belief systems in the culture as a whole, starting at the top, begin to shift.
So it may be that I'm asking you to repeat yourself a little bit, but I'd like to hear what it is you pull out from that. The next question that I have for you is related, and that was a natural transition. My question is, what do you see as your goals for your work? I heard sustainable differences. I heard changing beliefs and culture. I wonder how you would articulate an answer to the direct question of what are the goals that you bring with you toward doing this work?
Making the world a better place. That is both more engaging and productive.
More engaging and productive.
Yeah.
What do you mean by more engaging?
You can go into any organization and find people who are there for the paycheck. They aren't really engaged in having that organization be a success. My work wants to support those people wants to support the organization in managing itself so that all of their employees want to be fully engaged. So that they really can bring their whole selves and their full energy to that work. I mean, we spend on average 8 hours a day doing this work, and why? I mean, that works out to be 25% of our lives. And to spend that much of our time on this planet doing stuff that isn't engaging, isn't meaningful, that's a waste of human potential for sure.
So if the goal, if I hear you correctly, if the goal is making work more engaging and productive.
Making organizations more engaging.
Okay. How would you describe the strategies that you use for pursuing those goals? What is it that you're employing? You're building skills for engaging in human systems well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Helping the powers that be in those organizations using consensus building and collaboration from the top down to support their people in being fully engaged in meeting, fully supporting the work of the organization. Even a janitor, if he feels that he is being heard, will feel that his work is worthwhile.
Can you describe how it is that your dragon principles and how you're trying to share them make up some of those steps that you're taking to enact that strategy? What is it that how is it that your principles are being, how is it that your strategy is like being implemented? How are you using the dragon principles to do that?
Well, let's start at the very top. So the CEO or the executive director has called me up and said, I got problems that my teams aren't working very well. My executives are fighting each other. My employees are being rude to customers. It could be any of a dozen issues that the client brings to me. And then the first thing I will do is say, well, let's see if we can get a handle on what's going on in your executive team that is causing all that, because all this rolls down from the top in organizations. That's different in the world of communities, but in organizations, things roll from the top down. And I will find the same issues at the top that the CEO is complaining about throughout the organization. Now, as I do my diagnosis, it will always turn out that the CEO in some fashion is contributing to that issue. So now I'm doing a good deal of coaching with that CEO in support of him or her working with his executive team so that they can become a more productive and engaged group of people. Once that work is done, then we begin talking about how do we push that down into the rest of the organization.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that your strategy for making, you didn't use the word institutions. I'm bringing that. It's like if the organizations people work in are the institutions that make up the society we live in, and then you are in order to pursue making the institutions that we live and work and engage in more engaging and productive, your strategy is to come in at the top of that power structure and support the people responsible for the culture and policies and practices of that institution in allowing a more engaging and productive environment to happen almost in spite of their limitations or despite their limitations, as we all have.
Yeah, the policies and all that is great, but it has to come out of how the executive team is actually behaving. Mm-hmm. Because the rest of the organization is watching what they do more than what they say. It's the same thing with kids and their parents. Parents can say, don't do what I do what I say, but the kids will do, the employees will do what their bosses, what the parents are doing.
And that's why you actually focus on human systems as opposed to the systems that those humans are operating in or create or build together.
Well, it's the human systems that are making everything else work or not work. You can have the best computer system in the world. You can have the best machines in the world, but their functionality is totally dependent upon how well that human system is dealing with those machines and systems. Totally.
So what do roadblocks look like for you in this work, and how do you work to overcome them?
No. Well, the first one is that the people at the top of the organization have this belief that they should at least pretend they know what they're doing, so that they don't particularly want to listen to somebody that wants to re-educate them. But when the pain gets bad enough, they'll call me or do something different. A perfect example is Uber. Not that Uber has called or will ever call me, you know. But notice the CEO there is now history. And a large part of the executive team is turning over because the pain the pain in that organization got so bad that other powers that be, board members, as well as customers, were saying, this has to change, until they forced a change. I mean, you know, I would bet you a dime to a dollar that the style of Mr. Kalanick became the style of the organization from top to bottom, because that's the only way it works.
So for you and your work, you're saying that one of the kind of the primary roadblock is resistance from the top.
Well, of course.
And is there anything else you can share about what you do about that to intervene or to try to influence that, or any other roadblocks you would mention?
Okay. Once I get in with the CEO, we've already begun, because the CEO has said in one set of words or another, I need help. Now, the words come out more like, my people need help. You know, it's never him or her, you know, but that's essentially what's being said. What I'm doing isn't working anymore. I need help, even though he's saying, oh, it's my first line people, or it's my training director, or it's this, that, or the other. But essentially he's saying, I've reached the end, I need help. So now I work with him to help him deal with the other resistance that goes on, because it's his organization, not mine. As he begins to rebuild his relationships with his team and his people through my support, coaching, and facilitation, that resistance begins to melt away. And as soon as people begin to notice, oh, things are improving, then all the resistance begins to disappear.
Nice. Just in my own vocabulary, the way I think about what you're saying, what I hear, the way it gets translated in when I hear what I'm hearing you is, there's an acceptance on the part of leadership that there's something that they don't know how to do well enough. That there's an openness to learning to do something differently because there's an incentive behind it.
Even if they're not willing to say that directly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I hear you saying that that is that's for all of us and all of the people down the line. It's this willingness, this opening of there's something I can learn here.
If the CEO is open to being different, to be more transparent, to be more upfront, like everything else, that rolls right on downhill too.
Yeah.
Just like his dysfunctional behavior had rolled downhill. So now his functional behavior starts rolling downhill.
So what it sounds like there's a collective learning process happening.
That's a great word for it, collective learning process.
And you have a strategy of where you enter it from and a rationale for why, specifically in the kinds of institutions that you engage with. What would, in your words, what would you say we are collectively learning right now? What is it that is important for us to collectively learn right now?
We as a society?
Well, good question. It's open for me. Who do you think the we is, and what do you think that collective learning is that's so, you use the term, forget exactly what you said. I think you said to make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think it is that we could be collectively learning that would make the world a better place? And who is the we for you when you say that?
Well, I can tell you the what is, and the bottom line of the what is that we can begin to use our differences for mutual support and synergy rather than use our differences for contention and pressuring other people to conform. If we could just do that, now I've got a bunch of other principles that help people to do that, but that's where, I mean, that is the major shift that we have to make, is in our power dynamics. Witness Congress. Well, we were just talking about Uber. I mean, they were playing a strictly win-lose game with their drivers, with the cities they wanted to go in. I mean, it was, they were playing really rough. And the world is telling them now, stop doing that. It's not working. We haven't yet found, well, we haven't chosen to do that with our Congress yet. But Congress is a great example of where we are very, very busy in playing win-lose. That in the past 16 to 24 years, that the principle of compromise that used to drive Congress has dissipated, and it needs to come back.
So that was a whole lot. I'm a couple things. One is I think that for some of us, it can be that it's possible to kind of separate out, well, it would be that we're trying to get to a place where our differences can be accommodated effectively, but that isn't necessarily tied to the process, and that you're actually identifying that is what we have to learn how to do, is that.
Right, I thought that's what you had asked me.
No, it's I mean, what I'm saying is I think that there's a distinction for some people. I think what we want to do is figure out is to figure out what it looks like when we compromise, but I don't think we're always aware that we actually need to learn how to do that.
Yes, that is true. That's why we've got 7 other principles to help do that.
And then another thing that I heard you say is you connected that idea to the concept of win-win, win-lose, and gave an example of Uber. And I wonder if you could just say...
And Congress was the other
Yeah. I wonder if you could say a little bit more though about how you saw Uber as not being able to accommodate people's differences. Like, what was the link for you there?
Uber was in constant conflict with the cities that they wanted to work to have their drivers be there. Often they would work it out eventually, like the city of New York. I mean, it took them a year. No, it took them several years before they finally worked out an agreement with the city of New York, with Paris. You know, they could have probably done those agreements much more quickly had they not been as combative as they were. I mean, they would simply ignore what that city's rules were, you know, and go in anyway until the city took them to court and told them to stop. You know, then they'd have to stop.
Interesting. So for you, I asked the question. The question was, what do you think we're collectively learning right now? And it sounds like, you know, I really like obviously Congress is a very relevant example at the moment. I like the example of Uber because it carries a little bit less, it's just as concrete.
It's just not as big. Yeah.
But you're identifying the learning piece as when you set it up as win-lose, it limits the possibilities for what can be learned about how to accommodate each other's needs.
Absolutely.
Great.
When we are playing win-lose, we are using our differences to determine who's going to be winner and who's going to be the loser, rather than learning from them. I mean, it's like night and day.
Can you say that again?
When we're playing win-lose, we use our differences to determine who's going to win and who's going to lose, rather than using those differences to learn from.
Thank you. For me, the driving question driving my work is, how can we learn to be here well together?
Oh, yes.
And yeah. I wonder for you, do you have a central question or value or belief or principle that you could pull out that drives your work, that sits underneath it?
It's the understanding of human systems, that we do it together and succeed, or we do it contentiously and succeed maybe marginally, or fail. You know, it strikes me, you know, that a lot of companies operate from a win-lose perspective with their employees, and a lot of them are still making money. That's because money is obviously pretty easy to make if you have a company. But those companies could be, well, what's his name? The guy that wrote In Search of Excellence, Tom Peters, years ago talked about that most companies could improve their productivity by 50 to 60%. Absolutely, you know, and I say, in some cases, it's 70 and 80%. Yeah.
If they, what?
Stop playing win-lose with their people and had less turnover, had less conflict in their team, had fewer turf battles, had less gossip, had folks more aligned and engaged toward the success of the company. So
you're actually challenging the assumption that win-lose produces I mean, and that is one of the premises. You know what? I'm going to leave this aside because this is going to take this into another direction that
Okay.
I'm not going to go there. I almost did. I'm going to go a different direction.
All right.
How you've given us kind of a picture of how you do your work and why, and set up this and given us a general sense of to make the world a better place. I wonder if you could share with us what is the vision of a world that is a better place that accomplishing your goals would help us create? What is it that you're working toward more concretely? What is your vision? When you say the world could be a better place, what does that mean to you?
Your question is so general. I'm struggling.
Well, like for example, in your last comment, you said, companies could be making even more money.
Yeah.
Is that part of your vision for why you do what you do? What is it that, what is it that making the world a better place is a very general statement? And I'm asking you,
that would look like?
Yeah, more something, where's the meat in it? What does it mean to you?
Fewer wars, less poverty, less hunger, fewer suicides, stronger families. That enough?
Okay. Healthier human systems. Healthier.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Can you share with us?
Better physical health? Yeah.
It could be a long list, couldn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We could be better in a dozen ways.
Yeah. Can you think of an example? I'd like to hear an example of an organization or a group or an institution that, despite their good intentions, has a vision or works toward goals that are different than yours, and in what ways?
Okay, so let's see if I understand your question via my answer. Let's take Wall Street.
Okay.
I mean, their goal is to make money from money. And I mean, Wall Street doesn't produce anything that improves the productivity of our world. I mean, they've got a totally different goal.
And what do you think that goal is?
Making money for the sake of making money.
In what ways do you see that Wall Street pursuing the making of money actually, what does it do to your work? How does it impact your work? How does it impact your ability to do your work or the outcomes?
So many companies, particularly companies that are listed on the stock exchanges, their view is, let's provide, what are the right words? Better source of investment for their investors. No, a better return on investment. That's what it is. A better ROI for their investors. In the short run, when the solutions that are more effective in the long run need to be looked at in the long run. Now, take a very different kind of company, Amazon, who has an owner who is fully invested in the long run, who will sustain losses because he's reinvesting the revenue. He says that's fine. We're building for the long run. He doesn't pay any attention to the calls for his investors to turn over their money more quickly. He's focused on the long run, and you can watch how he's succeeding. You can look at Apple, who decided, let's focus on having our products be the best products that we can make them, rather than deal with what the market may be calling for in the short term. And notice how wildly successful they are.
And so what is the connection for you between looking at the long run and the health of human systems, as opposed to, like, that's an...
Well, not sure I can talk well about that, particularly since I don't have direct data about those two companies. Mm-hmm. It's an example of short-term versus long-term. A company that I do have some experience with is so I won't name them, but it's a light manufacturing company that has been very, very successful, and they saw themselves as doing that through supporting their human system. But it was really ironic. They called me because they wanted to improve their diversity in terms of people of color and women. Now, as I got into that company, their success really wasn't based upon their beautiful culture. Their success was they had a set of products that no one else had. So they had kind of a captive market. Then as soon as their competition began to catch up with them, then they began to really focus back on productivity without paying sufficient attention to their human system. So it's like they really got themselves kind of bass-backward there. It's like, oh God. Yes.
There's a connection there. I hear. Tell me if I'm right or not. I heard you kind of correlate short-term goals of making money with, or short-term goals with making money, and long-term goals with something else.
No. Short-term goals regarding return on investment for investors.
Okay.
It's a very different ballgame than making money.
Okay. Because
Amazon, in the long run, makes more money than all of them put together, and so does Apple. So it's not just about it's making money in the short term.
So for you, the goal, I'm looking for a word, that the making of money correlates to the success of the human system.
Well, sure. I mean, that's so even in large or small not-for-profit organizations. If they don't have the revenue to pay their expenses, they go out of business.
Okay.
End of story.
Thank you. So let's go back to Wall Street, your initial example, or if you prefer, to the last example you gave that you have more experience with or more direct knowledge about. But my question to you is, well, I would like to stick with this idea of an institution, an organization, a group that has good intentions, and you see their work as somehow having an impact on yours. Can you say again, sorry, how do you see Wall Street's, this pursuit of Wall Street, how do you see, when you gave the example of Wall Street, sorry, how do you see the impact of that kind of aim at return on investment impacting your work or your goal?
They don't call me.
They don't have an incentive to call you.
They got different goals.
Right. What would be your message? If you could send a message to Wall Street, what would it be?
You could support your investors better by having a longer range viewpoint.
And what is there something that other people or groups or institutions could potentially do to support your work or to connect your work to others? What is it you would look for from others if you could?
If I had a way to publicize more broadly the success I've had working with organizations, that would work.
And as a last question that I have, I wonder if you'd be willing to share when you falter in some way or are who or what or where are your resources of support, and what do you get from them? What does that look like for you?
Oh, actually, you've hit a very important issue that goes for me as well as my clients, that without a healthy support system, there is nothing that will be accomplished. That no one has accomplished anything of any significance by themselves. It always involves a human system. So I have colleagues, I've got friends who at this point, at some point, all are involved in my work. Whom I've taught, or rather who have learned from me, who I have worked with as partners. And when I run into a situation where it's like, whatever I'm doing isn't working, I give one of them a call and let's talk it through. If I run into personal issues that I'm in a quandary about making no progress with, once I come to my senses that, Michael, you are not going to figure this out by yourself, because I will spend some time there, unfortunately, then I give one of them a call, or one of them give me a call. Michael, haven't heard from you in a while. What's up? Oh, I'm fine. Oh, really? Right. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
yeah.
And creating the change is all about building those support systems for our goals.
It really does come full circle to the assumptions underneath your work.
Absolutely.
We cannot do it alone.
And that's why we have to build healthy human systems.
What was the distinction you made between teaching someone and someone learning from you?
Oh, when I went through the school system, when I went through college, the 95% of it was a teacher standing up in front of the room and feeding me information. That's a sad-ass way of learning, if you excuse my French. They wanted to fill what they saw as my empty cup. Students do not have empty cups. If we can engage with the students, like I suggest that employers engage with their people so that we do it together, then I support them by facilitating their learning, supporting them doing the learning rather than me doing the teaching.
I mean, what I hear you saying is another way of understanding the idea of being able to benefit from each other's differences.
It's a collaborative process.
Yeah.
Just as what needs to happen in the workplace, it needs to be happening in the learning place. We need to be doing it together. And doing it that way, I wind up learning more as well, because I'm simply one of the collaborators. Yeah. That's not what happens when somebody is standing up in front of the room and reading from their notes.
Did you use the word collaborator? You said I'm simply one of the collaborators?
Yes.
So here's a question for you. You're not, I'd say, I would argue that you're not simply one of the collaborators when you're in that.
I'm one of the lead collaborators.
Sorry?
I am the lead collaborator and facilitator, yes.
Okay.
That's a point well made.
Super. Is there anything else that you would drop in at the end here that you think would be useful for me or for people who might watch this about you or your work that would make this picture a little fuller for you?
Sure. That there's one more principle. Well, I'll talk about one more principle that kind of drives everything else. And that to get to those healthy human systems, we've got to start off with conscious use of self for the leaders of those systems, so that people get off of automatic and begin to be more intentional and deliberate in looking at how is their behavior having the impact that they want or not having the impact that they want. I'll leave you with that.
Thank you so much for your time.
That was good. Yes. Right. I'll get a copy of this.
Well, let me end the recording. Thank you so much, Michael.
Yes, sure. Well,